kids, it's me, your teacher, and today we will be discussing how the Industrial Revolution happened in South Africa because of the Mineral Revolution. So it's basically just an introduction to the topic that we did last time I made a video as well. So the last time I made a video, just going to remind you, we did a glossary. I uploaded a activity on the D6, which then should have been done after you wrote down the glossary. And now today we are going to do how did this mineral revolution happen in South Africa. So you will remember that an industrial revolution is basically a rapid change where a lot of factories are built and a lot of industries are built, and basically we start getting a lot of growth in a country when an industrial revolution happens. So South Africa in the 1800s was very, very flat, I would say. There weren't a lot of cities, there weren't a lot of towns, there were small groups of people that lived very spaced out, very far away from each other. Large tracts of land where just nobody was living. And what made it into this bustling city that we know today? You'll find that in Cape Town there's a big city, in Kimberley there's a big city, the Witwatersrand big cities, and Johannesburg, one of the biggest cities in South Africa. Did this just happen by accident? No, it happened because of the Mineral Revolution. So basically what happened was that in the year 1867, diamonds were found in Kimberley. And a few years later, gold was discovered in the Witwatersrand. And what happened was that everybody started to rush to South Africa because it was viewed as a way to get rich quick. Unfortunately, the discovery laid the foundation for racism and the control of white South Africans over black South Africans that I did discuss the last time in the previous video. Alright, so let's have a look. Did you know? The discovery of diamonds and gold was a turning point in South African history because we basically went from a very rural agricultural society to a very industrialized one, and it also led to the beginnings of racial segregation and racism in South Africa as well. So the mineral revolution changed South Africa from an agricultural society to one the largest gold producing country in the world. And the city of Johannesburg was built on the gold mining industry. Johannesburg is also known as Igoli. Many of you will be familiar with the show. I don't know if it's still on, but it used to come on SABC3, Igoli, which basically means the city of gold. So Johannesburg was literally named after the fact that there was so much gold that led to the formation of the city being formed. So you can have a look at source A, Johannesburg in 1886. You can see that everything is completely spaced out. Everybody's got their little plot of land. You don't see massive bustling towns or proper roads or anything like that. And then just a few years later in 1906, whoa, complete difference. You can literally see how buildings have just seemingly popped up out of nowhere. They've become industrialized, they are roads, things like that. So you can actually literally see how finding gold has actually industrialized Johannesburg. So what did you notice about source A? I'll give you about a minute to write down about 3 things that you noticed in source A. Okay, so that is your minute up. Let's see what I have noticed about Source A. We notice that it's very rural. There are not many houses. There's lots of tents. It's empty and there's gravel roads. So just keep in mind, just because you don't have one of the things that I've written here doesn't mean your answer is wrong. If it is similar to that sort of an answer, um, then you can actually give yourself the mark for that. So very rural. If maybe you wrote that there's lots of farming, if you wrote it's very agricultural, if you wrote that there was a few houses, or you note the number of houses that were there, you can give yourself the mark. If you mention about the tents, you can give yourself the marks. You can mention that it's very empty. You can mention that it's not industrialized. There's so many things that you can mention. Doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong if you haven't answered what I have answered. Now let's have a look at the next part, which says, what do you notice about source B? So I think what I'll do is I'll actually go back to source B, and you can just take a good long look at it, give yourself about a minute, and then just write down about 3 or 4 things that you noticed about source B. So I'm going to go back in 3, 2, 1, starts now. And that is the end of your minute. Did you write down 3 things that you noticed about source B? Let's see what I've got as an answer. Remember, just a reminder, just because you don't have the same thing that I've written down doesn't mean your answer is wrong. Um, you may have just phrased it differently or things like that. So just take whatever you have and maybe just show your parents and ask them if they agree with it. Let's see what I've written down as an answer. So I've noticed that there are lots of buildings, there are more people living there, there are tar roads, and it appears to be very busy. So you'll see that you can make a very direct comparison between source A and source B. They are very different. Um, you won't get questions like this because it's for grade 9, but sometimes you will have to compare sources, and this is how you do it. You write down the things that you notice, you write down the things that are the same, you write down the things that are different, and then you look at source B, you write down the things that are the same, you write down the things that are different, and then you overlap them. So you would answer this question by saying, in source A, South Africa or Johannesburg is very rural, whereas in source B, you can see that there are lots of buildings. So that is how you will be comparing sources. It is a bit of a tricky skill and hopefully something that you will learn by the time you get to grade 12. So, Britain, diamond mining, and increasing labor control and land expansion. So, the discovery of diamonds led to a huge demand for labor or work. So, people didn't want to dig up these diamonds by themselves, they wanted to get cheap labor, and it's very important that it be cheap, so that they can make as much profit as possible by selling the diamonds that they get. So, what would happen is that these rich people who discovered diamonds would then start to build mines in these areas, and then they called for what is known as migrant laborers. So they wanted people to come from the reserves or the homelands so that they can come and work in these areas like Kimberley, um, for a very cheap fee compared to what they would have had to pay white workers. So you'll see that why would many Africans choose to work for cash wages? Because you'll remember that in African society at this time, money wasn't really a big thing. Most people bartered, which means they traded with each other, or they gave cattle for something valuable, or whatever the case would be, they wouldn't really work for cash. Um, but with the arrival of Europeans into South Africa, it opened up a new way, and new things that they could do. So the cash wages allowed them to buy guns, um, because remember, Europeans were the primary producers of the guns, so in order to get it, they would have to literally buy it with cash. They also wanted to buy farming equipment, to take back home to the reserves, and they wanted money to pay la bola, the bride price. So you will remember that, or well, some of you will know that la bola can either be paid in cattle or cash, sometimes both. So the cash actually really helped in terms of paying la bola. So those that didn't have cattle, they could also pay the la bola in cash. Okay, so the next time I see you guys, we'll be doing the compound system. Um, I will explain this in a bit more detail in the next video. So I think I will leave it there and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.